Hello and welcome to my reading and critical discussion of The Arriver's Tale as told to Abdulrazak Gurna from the Refugee Tales Volume 1, along with the UK's asylum seeker system. The Refugee Tales is a charity organisation project which scribes and anonymously publishes the testimonies of asylum seekers held in immigration removal centres. These facilities hold detainees in densely populated accommodation with limited freedom to move within and none to leave, in preparation for deportation or appeal decisions. Uniquely to the UK, there is no maximum detention time. The record is 9 years. The Refugee Tales aim to raise awareness of the injustice of indefinite detention and of the asylum seeker system as a whole by showing the human lives and experiences impacted by their dysfunctionality. Their goal is to end indefinite detention for good. My project writes to the world by building on their efforts. I've included a full reading of The Arriver's Tale to act as reference and preview of the full project in order to draw new readers to it. Their website is linked in the description. Secondly, I will be discussing the tale with my own research into the asylum seeker system, its policy and statistics, in order to clarify the reality of 3 common preconceptions surrounding immigration. My goal is to educate listeners so they can be better informed when voting on immigration policies in future. So, without further ado, let's begin part 1. The Arriver's Tale, as told to Abdulrazak Gurna. I came by air. It may sound odd to say that. What other way, then? Some people walked, many drowned. They were desperate. I wasn't desperate, but I was very frightened, because I had made some people very angry with me. My crime was to tell the girls who attended my Sunday school that they should not agree to be circumcised. My Sunday school was supposed to be a reading and writing class, but I slipped in the good word any way I could. I told them circumcision was genital mutilation and a barbaric and backward practice. Men forced women to do it so that they would know they were rubbish. The real intention was to hurt them and paralyse them and control them. When the day came for the girls to agree to the cut, 6 of them refused. I wasn't there, but I discovered what had happened that same night when I heard angry voices outside my house, bidding me to come out and take a beating for interfering with their daughters. It was a Muslim village in a Muslim country, and although I am a countryman, I'm a Christian who was now accused of interfering with their daughters. You can imagine my terror. When it quieted down outside and the angry people went away, perhaps to get more people to come and help them, I wheeled up my bicycle in the dark and rode away to safety in a nearby village. The next day I heard that the thatch of my house was set on fire that night, and that the people who did it were still looking for me and talking bad. So I ran away to the city, to the office of the charity NGO I worked for. The officer there was an Englishman, Bernard. He was my friend. He told me he would find out about the fire, that I shouldn't worry. Everything will be all right. But I thought I would go into hiding. A few days later he told me that the people who burned down my house came to look for me at the office, and they said they had some unfinished business with me. He told me to go to the police. That made me laugh. I did not mean to laugh, it just came out of me. I told Bernard that the police will beat me first and then hand me over to their brothers to finish the job. In that case, you have no choice but to stay in hiding, because those men look dangerous. These bad people went back to the office several times looking for me, and in the end Bernard suggested that I run away to Britain to seek asylum. It is a Christian country, and you are a Christian worker persecuted for doing Christian labour, Bernard said. He knew I would be given sanctuary, he said. Bernard himself was leaving, and he gave me his telephone number in London in case I needed him. How did I find the money for the fare? Friends helped me. My relatives promised to take care of my family. They could all see that my life was in danger, and this one spoke to that one until a fare for an Air Morocco flight to London was found. Friends arranged it all. So then I came by air, as I have already told you, and I arrived in London not knowing right from left, confused by the large spaces and the hushed crowds. But I talked myself into feeling strong, telling myself that I was doing something brave. I was wearing a suit I had made before I left, and which I still have and wear on special occasions, so I also told myself I was looking good. I was given some forms to complete, and I wrote what was necessary to save a life, and I was allowed to enter. I don't know how. I was confused and didn't know right from left, but somehow I said what was needed, because I knew they would not turn me away. I was persecuted for doing merciful labour, and I knew that London would not turn me away. The first preconception I want to talk about is the idea that immigrants falsify asylum claims in order to access UK government benefits or the job market. An asylum seeker is someone who seeks to live and work in the UK because they fear prosecution in their home country, specifically on grounds of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or any label that would put them at risk of because of social, religious, or political situations such as their gender or sexuality. They must also have failed to get protection from their home country, not be from an EU country, not have travelled through a safe third country, and they can't have a connection to a safe third country in which they could seek asylum alternative to that of the UK. The Arriver's Tale addresses this in part 1 by showing how the Arriver fits I think 8 out of these categories. He knows he's at risk because the mob tried to kill him. It's based partly on his differing religious views, namely that he's Christian and they're Muslim. He knows the authorities in his home country wouldn't help him. The police would laugh at him. He doesn't go through a third country. He isn't from an EU country. He's implied to be from Africa. And so he is the ideal asylum seeker. And yet he is not believed, despite being an ideal candidate. And this is the first sign of many in the story that the asylum seeker system is not working as intended. Additionally, prior to a successful refugee application, or 12 months waiting for one, asylum seekers cannot work, specifically to deter fraudulent economic migrants. In the meantime, they can access asylum support, so funding and housing from the government to sustain them. But a 2026 Parliament debate quoted the statistic that only 0.3% of these asylum seekers warranted investigation for fraud, and only 0.05% had support withdrawn because of it. Therefore, not only is fraudulent asylum claims unlikely because the risks of the dangerous journey compared to the delayed reward make it hard to believe people wouldn't do it unless it was necessary, there is statistical evidence counteracting it, meaning the bias and preconception of fraudulence is actually more dangerous to the functionality of the system because it deprives perfect candidates like the arriver of the protection they need. Part 2. I rang the number Bernard gave me, and he was happy to hear from me, but he said I could not go and stay with him. His wife said no. He said maybe we could meet somewhere for a coffee after I had settled down. I sat there in the airport, not knowing what to do next. Then a policeman approached me and suggested I go upstairs because it was warmer there. He asked me if I was all right, if I needed help. I wanted to tell him that I had nowhere to stay, that I only had a little money, but I thought he had taken me for a respectable person, and if I spoke to him like that, he would think I was just an African hooligan. So I went upstairs and did not ask for his help. I rang a friend from home who lived in Colchester. I am in London, I told him. That's brilliant news, he said. I'm coming to see you, I told him. Wonderful, he said. I don't have any money, I told him. He sent me the fare by Western Union, and that same evening I was in Colchester with my friend and his family. My friend teased me about my smart suit, and we laughed to see each other again after so long. But even as I ate the food his wife prepared for me, he told me I could not stay with them. I had already seen that myself. Him and his wife and their 3 small children lived in a small flat with only 2 rooms, and everything that I saw in their house told me that their lives were a struggle. No, he said. Now that I had arrived, I must go to the Home Office and ask for asylum. So he gave me the money, and the next day I went to Croydon. Yes, to Luna House. No, I was not frightened. Maybe a little anxious because I did not want to get lost and make a fool of myself. There, at Luna House, a woman interviewed me and wrote down all my details. I told her that I was a campaigner against female genital mutilation, and my life was in danger in my home country. Yes, she said, I am going to assign you emergency initial accommodation. Just sit there and wait now. By the end of the day, there were 6 of us waiting there, and we were all put in a van and taken to Barry House. There were 12 of us there, and we could go out if we wanted to. Mostly, I walked up and down the road, and if anyone looked in my direction, I smiled to show my gratitude for the welcome their country had given me. I stayed there for 5 days. We told each other stories of our escape from danger and death. Then 3 of us were sent to live in a house in Newcastle, where we stayed for a month. Then, after that, I was given a flat in Glasgow and 3 weeks' money, and all this time I was still waiting to be interviewed so that I could explain my need for sanctuary. I was eager for my interview because I knew that the officer would understand and sympathise with my reasons for coming here. In Glasgow, I met a Nigerian man in a shop, and he invited me to church. Everyone was an African at the church, including the pastor, and at the end of the service we were served African food prepared by the congregation. I found a community there and felt more welcome than I had ever felt since arriving. We had events and a day trip to the sea and to Stirling, which made the waiting less empty and anxious. After 1 month in Glasgow, I was called for interview. I was interviewed for 5 hours by 3 different people. All of them were calm and persistent, but I could tell from the way they asked me questions that there was something behind it. They did not believe me, and as the hours passed, I began to think what I had not thought possible over the 3 months I had been waiting. They did not want me here. They did not like me. The result of the interview was that I was refused permission to stay. The second preconception I'd like to address is the idea that asylum seekers receive free housing from the government and leaving nowhere to live for UK citizens. The way this works is if asylum seekers can prove they will be destitute within 14 days, they can stay in emergency initial accommodation for up to 4 weeks, after which they are spread across the country in long-term dispersal accommodation as part of the asylum support, and this is seen in Arriver's Tale when he is given initial accommodation and then moved up to Glasgow a month later. Upon getting refugee status, they have 28 days to move out of dispersal accommodation and to public accommodation. And to that end, in 2026, 10% of social housing was let to non-UK citizens, despite a waiting list of 1.3 million. As such, competition for accommodation is a concern, but important to note is that in 2026, nearly 3 in 10 asylum seekers stayed with friends or family, needing no extra accommodation, which the arriver tries to do unsuccessfully, further justifying his need for state support. Dispersal accommodation is also designed to settle asylum seekers with a recommended limit of 1 asylum seeker per 200 natives, specifically to not overwhelm the local population. This is maintained even in London, where 15% of the asylum seekers in this country are housed, second only to the northwest at 20%. Additionally, refugees can only settle where they have a local connection, like family, friends, or a previous dispersal accommodation, to preserve the not overwhelming the locals tenant. So, in short, asylum support is needed, but reducing the detriments of it on the natural population is an active concern that is being worked on and improved all the time. One way of doing this is with the opening of large sites where tens of thousands of people can be housed, such as converted army barracks and waterborne vessels like ferries, barges, and cruise ships to be moored off-site land. So yeah, housing is an issue, but it's getting better, and it's not a problem that is being left unsolved. Part 3. I felt as if I was something broken and discarded, thrown away with other broken things. I could not get over the stubborn and unruffled hostility of the officers. Perhaps you knew all along it was going to turn out like this, but I did not expect it. I really thought I would be heard differently. For the next 2 years my application to stay was repeatedly refused, from the beginning of 2007 until the middle of 2009. I was not even allowed to attend the hearing, but afterwards I was informed that my application was refused. I don't know what would have happened without the Refugee Council solicitor who took my case. Without her, I would probably have been bundled onto a plane and returned to my assassins. In 2009, my application at last was successful, but permission to stay did not mean the end of my arriver's tale. I was not allowed to work. My allowance, which was loaded onto an electronic card, only allowed me to shop in certain shops and for certain things. In the end, I took a job working illegally a few hours a week in a motor parts shop, just for pocket money. I don't know how the police found out, but they raided my flat at 4 a.m, overturned everything they could overturn, and took me away, hurriedly, as if I was a dangerous criminal. All my papers and all my property were lost during the arrest because I was not allowed to go back and was held away out of sight as if I was a poisonous snake or an infectious animal for several months. When my case eventually came to court, I was sentenced to 12 months in prison. 12 months for daring to take a little part-time job. Now I knew I had arrived. I was released in 2011 only to return to the limbo I was in before. I am not allowed to work. I have now been here for 8 years. I have no choice but to live where I am told to live and wait for the next hearing to allow my application to be considered. Do you know what limbo means? It means the edge of hell. The final preconception I will cover here is the idea that immigrants are stealing our jobs. I will begin my discussion by reinforcing that, as the arriver says, asylum seekers do not get full working rights or access to the NHS or benefits for that matter until they successfully get refugee status. In 2025, over 52,000 asylum seekers had been waiting for a decision for longer than 6 months, and in April 2026, the backlog for decision appeals was 80,000. Only after waiting for 12 months of being unable to work can asylum seekers apply for the right to work highly specific jobs from the immigrant salary list. Examples include doctor, geophysicist, or professional ballet dancer, leaving many still unemployable despite severe labour shortages in the NHS and agriculture being reported in 2025. This preconception feels like even more of a kick in the teeth when these asylum seekers' only income, or as the arriver calls it, allowance, is there for asylum support, which is only £7 a day in self-catered accommodation or £1.42 in catered accommodation. This is an increase on what it was before 2022 and the cost of living crisis, which was increased by 13p. Living in 2009, the arriver may have been able to stretch this further than a 2026 asylum seeker, but he is right that it isn't enough, especially not as he is forced to live on it for years on end. The arriver is a textbook refugee who is unjustly disbelieved and rejected. He tries and fails to house himself, grateful for the asylum support he must then rely on, only for that support to fail him as well, bringing everything crashing down when he resorts to illegal work to support himself. All of this, in my opinion, turns the arriver's tale from a testimony to a tragedy. His arrest and constant moving under the no-choice dispersal accommodation policy and lack of work deprive him of the community he finds and hobbles further integration. The dramatic irony of knowing the Refugee Tales draws material from indefinite detainees, despite no mention of detention in the text, makes it ambiguous whether limbo is the asylum seeker system meant to help the arriver stay, or the one holding him until he is forced to leave. This highlights the dysfunctionality of both immigration and deportation systems in the UK, because deciding which of them is warranted should be done quickly and respectfully of, the person's life and time being wasted when they can't support themselves or work for themselves or defend themselves. What's even worse is that refugee status only grants the right to stay for 2.5 years, after which the threat of persecution is reassessed should the asylum seeker apply for an extension, because indefinite leave to remain, and by extension citizenship, is only available to apply for once the refugee has lived in the UK as a refugee for 5 years, meaning that even if the arriver's appeal is successful and he finally gets his refugee status, he will just transition into another limbo. In conclusion, as far as my research shows, none of the preconceptions are true in the way they are often used, to lay all blame for an overloaded and suspicious system at the feet of individuals who need the help asylum is supposed to provide to avoid destitution, prosecution, or death. Because the asylum seeker system is broken. Cases take years because it is overloaded, and it is predominantly built on the asylum seeker's word versus the interviewer's judgment, allowing unconscious bias and misinformation like these preconceptions to spread like plague, with just as much damage wrought on people's lives. However, things are getting better. More accommodation is being built for the UK as a whole, and organisations like Oxford University's Migration Observatory, as well as the charity conglomerate Lift the Ban, my two main sources for parts 2 and 3, provide Parliament with statistics and evidence data and research on migration issues so that they can improve these systems and policies by staying as informed as possible. Additionally, Lift the Ban campaigns for lifting the 12-month work ban, instead granting asylum seekers the right to work anywhere after only 6 months. To this end, they have guides and templates on how to contact your MP regarding migration policy. So if you are interested in that or learning more on this topic, links to their website and Migration Observatory will be in the description. I hope you've enjoyed my project. Thank you for listening and have a lovely day.